Hello everyone, it's good to see you back. Has everyone here been enjoying the new roaming super update as of recently? As I've given a number of underused super a second chance to use in endgame, and they've all been quite interesting to use. One of them now has been a Titan Sentinel super, which when paired with Doomfang pauldrons and graviton lance, makes an amazing ad clearing build that's worth the investment, quite heavily. Which is why I'm going to show you the best version of this build that everyone is sleeping on, and more. So starting with the general aim and Exotica build, our aim is to show off the newly updated Sentinel Shield super and how Doomfang pauldrons has also received a buff alongside it, kind of. For this we will be using Doomfang pauldrons and graviton lance. Let's start with our exotic armor, Doomfang pauldrons, with its exotic effect, Horns of Doom. It states, defeating targets with void damage has a chance to grant an escalating bonus to damage with void weapons. Defeating targets with void melee grants super energy. While Sentinel Shield is active, defeating targets with melee attack recharges Shield Throw, which extends your super on hitting a target. As our super gets faster regeneration now, the extra super energy gained from the exotic is a nice add-on to speed up the process further. Ultimately, this will allow us to use our super back to back depending on the encounter, and if we can maintain our melee uses as much as possible. The Void Weapon Surge bonus is also quite exceptional, as it means you can easily get a ×1 to 4 Surge without investing into your mods if you wish. However, this isn't something worth heavily relying on, as our melee charge can be iffy at times with its connection. Now our second exotic is Graviton Lance with its exotic effect, Black Hole, which states, a second shot of a burst rips a hole through space-time, doing high damage and recoil with no fall-off. Graviton is one of the best pulses to use in game with how smooth its fire rate is and how powerful it is with taking out a ton of enemies. Combine this with our Void super and making full use of Echo Instability and Cosmology is where the builder is going to be able to use the super as often as possible, since its effects can spread onto multiple enemies at once. Now if done right, you can in theory get a full super back in under a minute, but only if the scenario is right. Alternatively, the Le Monarch is a good replacer with similar effects that works in favour of the build if you don't want to use Graviton Lance at any point. For aspects and fragments, we then have the following. Offensive Bulwark, where while having an overshield, your grenades charge faster, you have increased melee range and damage, and melee final blows restores a small portion of your overshields. Bastion, where casting your barricade grants overshields to you and your allies over time. Echo Instability, where defeating targets with grenades grants you volatile rounds. Echo Starvation, where picking up a Void Breach or Orb Power grants you Devour. Echo Provision, where damaging a target with grenades grants melee energy. And Echo Domineering, where after suppressing a target, you gain increased mobility, weapons get auto-reloaded from reserves, and you get Void Breaches after defeating a debuff target. As the build's super regeneration is not something we need to invest any more in, the rest of the kit should round out its basic functions as best as possible. Now having overshields and Echo Starvation will help with the survivability of the kit, but making full use of our suppressor grenades is where it's really at. Using this with Domineering and netting kill after will generate a Void Breach, which will grant us class ability and Devour via the Starvation mod. Now if you have the Served Cold seasonal mod, this will grant you melee energy from collecting them, and then combine this with Echo Provision as well, and you can get back around half your melee back in an instant. This is important to note, as Offensive Bulwark will increase our melee damage, and Doomfang pauldrons will give us a ×1 to 4 Void Surge buff, and 20% super energy back upon net melee kills. All of this is fairly easy to maintain and help speed up our super regeneration over time, but ultimately this will allow us within our super mode to get our melee charges back even faster, and also have a longer lasting super overall. As shown, you won't need Monte Carlo to help support the build even more, as the provided setup gives out quite a big boost to start with. Now combine all of this into a good Void Exotic, and you'll be getting your super back to back quite easily with no effort. For the mods and stats, we have Resilience and Discipline marked with the highest priorities for the build. Strength is also going to be used at tier 6, but will be further supported through mods and subclass trades. Resilience we have ours at tier 10 for 30% damage reduction. Now I've gone ahead and added the Harmonic Resistance mod for the incoming Void attacks, which is good enough for the build. We do also have Overshields being applied to the build as well, so this will increase our survival odds by quite a bit more. A discipline, we then have ours at a tier 10 for a 1 minute 1 second cooldown via suppressor grenades. While I can see vortex grenades also being used for the endgame of the build, which you can use, suppressors will be playing a much more bigger role as explained earlier. With their strengths, they are pretty good with dealing with the more aggressive enemies in game, but only if you can catch them out at right angles. I've also noticed that they have a greater blast radius compared to others, which makes it easier to activate its effects more often. Now, this is more of a personal choice to select, but I do recommend you give it a try at least once, and also just practice with it, as it is quite hard to master. Now, when it comes down to the rest of the stats, you should use the following as well. Impact Induction times 1 for a 12% grenade buff. Momentum Transfer times 2 for a 17% melee buff. And then Outreach for a 12% melee buff for all recommendation of mods to have for the current build. Additional mods, we have the following. Heavy Ammo Finder, Reserves and Scavenger mods for a heavy weapon. Dynamo, where using your class ability near enemies will reduce your super cooldown. Harmonic Siphon for creating orbs of power via matching elemental weapon types. Charged Up for a +1 armor charge. Harmonic Holster, where matching elemental weapons will auto-reload when put away. A Void Weapon Surge for a 10% Void Weapon buff. A Powerful Attraction for automatically collecting orbs of power when using your class ability. And Reaper, where using your class ability and then getting a kill will produce a orb of power. So as we've covered our exotic priming weapon and others, I would then advise you to pick some super weapons for the build. What I recommend are all optional, so please keep this in mind. Our secondary is going to be the Lost Signal with auto-loading holster and vorpal weapon. A good weapon to have when you like to keep up the pressure against all. Lost Signal is fantastic with its quick burst damage when paired up with concussive reload mod. Now if you don't intend to use this in specific GMs or endgame content, then you can carry this with you wherever you go since its effects are quite profound. However, it's not a must have since we are using a heavy grenade launcher within the kit as well. So swapping this out for the new Iron Banner sidearm is actually something worth considering along the way. For heavy, we then have Edge Transit with Field Prep and Bait and Switch. Perfect against many bosses you face. The following role isn't the best god roll to run with, but it does a good enough job when combining with Concussive Reload and Echo Instability. Do be warned when using this in close range scenarios with your super, as it may backfire on you, so it might be best to swap this out for something more safer, like a machine gun. With the recent roaming super buff now active as of last week, I want to see just how effective such a super is now in endgame. Surprisingly, it does have a better place now in higher endgame content, as long as the user is facing the more weaker tier enemies first to start with. Now this build is focusing on maximizing abilities such as our grenades and melee to trigger our Doomfang exotic traits. So with suppressor grenades on hand, we can trigger Echo Domineering effect for auto-reloading our weapons and creating void breaches as we go along. This will then lead into our Supernova mod, where our next void ability we do can cause a large-scale weakening pulse to anyone caught by it, and also using Serve Cold will grant us melee energy back as well. All of this works out well for us, as it means that we don't need to rely too heavily on melee or grenade based effects to keep the build going, which in Doomfang's case means that we can trigger effects of getting a ×1 to 4 Void Surge and a 20% super energy on kills quite easily. Now when it comes down to super, it was as expected, which is using your phone shield will extend your super duration for longer and does allow you to have it up twice as long. This has worked out considerably well for me, but I must say this isn't perfect to use in endgame fully. My key issue is how weak my super throwing ability is against the more tougher enemies in endgame, where I need to actually be up close and personal rather than using my projectiles. Now this is fine against a few enemies, but not all of them, and as shown, it can go very south. Now I did add in the Starvation Fragment and Overshield via Barricades and the Resistance mod, but truthfully, this is still not enough in the grand scheme of things. You will need something that can grant active health when in your super, such as Controlled Demolitionist or Echo of Leeching, etc. As the super and build is strong enough to use in endgame, but you can get pretty humbled quite quickly when surrounded. Overall, except for the survivor aspect of the build, it still conveys its strength in the majority of content in game pretty well, and I do recommend you give this a try at least once, and then go from there. So there we have it. I hope you all enjoyed the build breakdown. If you have any thoughts on the content shared, then please leave a comment below. While if you enjoy the content and want more of these videos, then leave a like and a sub while you're here. A dim link for the build is located below in the pin section, and I do advise you to check out my playlist for more. It was great sharing today's video with you all, and I hope to see you again soon.